The sheikh's $40 million diamond had passed every test known to modern gemology. Spectrometers, refractometers, 2 hours under the most sophisticated lenses in Dubai, all confirmed it was flawless. But a waitress carrying a tray of coffee glanced at the stone for exactly 2 seconds and knew the truth. The machines were wrong. The experts were wrong. The dispersion pattern was a lie only she could see. Sheikh Hassan was no ordinary collector. At 52, he owned vaults filled with stones worth more than the GDP of small nations. And this diamond, the one he had just purchased from an exclusive dealer in Geneva, was meant to be his crowning jewel. $40 million, absolutely flawless. The jeweler in Dubai spent 2 hours confirming it. So why did Maya, a 28-year-old waitress who grew up fixing watches with her father in Mumbai, see a fraud that a laboratory worth millions could not detect? The answer goes far deeper than a single fake stone. It exposes a rot at the highest levels of the global diamond trade, where certificates are forged, machines are fooled, and billionaires are the perfect marks. And it all traces back to one man, a forger so brilliant that he nearly pulled off the greatest diamond heist in history without ever touching a vault. Sheikh Hassan bin Rashid Al Nasser did not collect beautiful things for the pleasure of owning them. He collected them because he understood, with a certainty that bordered on obsession, that true mastery of anything, art, horses, gems, demanded a level of discernment that most human beings never attained. At 52, he had spent 3 decades building one of the most valuable private gem collections in the Middle East. Not because he wanted to impress anyone, though certainly his peers were impressed. He collected because he needed the verification. Every flawless stone was proof that he could see what others missed. His father, a pearl diver before oil reshaped their world, had taught him to look beneath the surface. The old man would hold a rough oyster to the light and say, "The sea hides its treasures for a reason. Only the patient eye earns the reward." This diamond, the stone that would become either his greatest triumph or his deepest humiliation, arrived in Dubai on a warm October evening. It came in an armored courier's case, handcuffed to a man who had not slept in 36 hours. The dealer in Geneva, a white-haired Belgian named Victor Cleese, had personally overseen its extraction from a private vault. Victor had handled some of the most significant gem transactions in history. He had brokered stones for royalty, for tech billionaires, for the kind of wealth that never appears on any public registry. His reputation was beyond reproach, which was precisely why Hassan had trusted him with $40 million. Hassan received the diamond in the private gallery of his penthouse overlooking the Persian Gulf. The room was climate-controlled, humidity-balanced, and lined with display cases that held stones worth collectively more than $700 million. But this new acquisition was meant to surpass them all. A D-flawless 52-carat cushion-cut diamond with a clarity that, according to the Gemological Institute of America certificate, placed it among the top 0.001% of all diamonds ever graded. The GIA report number checked out. The laser inscription on the girdle matched. When Hassan held the loop to his eye, he saw nothing but perfection, a stone so pure it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Yet something gnawed at him. It was not rational. It was not even identifiable. It was the faintest whisper of intuition, the same instinct that had saved his father from a storm that claimed 3 other boats off the coast in 1962. The stone was too perfect. Every natural diamond carries what gemologists call birthmarks, microscopic inclusions, internal graining, subtle asymmetries that tell the story of its formation over billions of years beneath the Earth's crust. This diamond had none of that. Victor Cleese had explained it away as one of nature's miracles, a stone formed under such ideal conditions that even its crystal lattice aligned perfectly. Hassan wanted to believe him. He had already wired the money. The press release had been drafted. The acquisition would make headlines across the gemological world. So he did what any cautious collector with unlimited resources would do. He took the diamond to the one man in Dubai whose expertise no one questioned. Ibrahim Okonkwo, the Nigerian-born master jeweler whose shop in the Gold Souk had served the royal families of 7 emirates for over 40 years. Ibrahim's reputation was unassailable. He had caught forgeries that fooled Sotheby's. He had testified as an expert witness in gem fraud trials from London to Singapore. If Ibrahim said a stone was genuine, it was genuine. And Ibrahim had spent 2 hours with the diamond, deploying a battery of instruments that most jewelers only saw at GIA headquarters. Ultraviolet fluorescence spectrometers, infrared absorption imaging, diamond view machines that revealed growth patterns invisible to any loupe. He had even used a device called the diamond sheikh, which measured the stone's absorption lines to detect traces of nitrogen. Natural diamonds almost always contain nitrogen. Lab-grown diamonds do not. The diamond sheikh flashed green natural. The Raman spectrometer confirmed the crystallographic structure. Every test yielded the result Hassan desperately wanted to hear. The diamond was real. It was natural. It was, in Ibrahim's words, one of the finest stones I have ever had the privilege of examining. Hassan should have been relieved. Instead, as he listened to Ibrahim's glowing assessment, a strange thought drifted through his mind. Not about the diamond, but about his father. About the lesson the old pearl diver had taught him when he was a boy. A fool looks for what he expects to see. A wise man looks for what should not be there. Hassan did not yet know that, in the next several minutes, he would meet the person who would vindicate that wisdom. Maya Kapoor had been working at the Gold Souk's most exclusive jewelry house for 14 months, but she was not a jeweler. She was not a gemologist. Officially, she was a hospitality attendant, one of several young women employed to serve coffee, tea, and imported dates to the high-net-worth clients who visited the VIP lounge. Her uniform was a modest abaya in navy blue, her hair pinned beneath a hijab, her movements precise and unobtrusive. She had learned invisibility early. Her father, Rajesh Kapoor, had spent 45 years running a cramped repair shop in the Chor Bazaar district of Mumbai. The shop was barely 200 square feet, its walls lined with cracked wooden drawers divided into compartments for watch gears, broken chains, and loose gemstones. As a child, Maya had watched him work from a stool in the corner, mesmerized by the way his thick fingers could manipulate tweezers finer than a surgeon's. Rajesh did not have certificates. He did not have spectrometers. What he had was a lifetime of handling stones, thousands of them, from industrial-grade beryls to the occasional Golconda diamond that showed up in a family heirloom. He taught Maya one thing that no gemological institute could. Machines measure what they are told to measure. Your eyes, if you train them properly, will see what the machine's maker never anticipated. He taught her to look at a gem's dispersion pattern, the way it broke white light into spectral colors. Natural diamonds had a specific fire, a particular balance between brilliance and dispersion that came from billions of years of crystal formation. Synthetics, even the best ones, scattered light differently. The difference was extraordinarily subtle, often invisible to the naked eye. But Rajesh had trained Maya to see it, using rough diamonds and cubic zirconia, and eventually high-end moissanite and synthetic diamonds, quizzing her from the age of 9 until she could identify a stone's origin in seconds. By the time Maya turned 28, her father had passed away, the shop had closed, and she had traveled to Dubai seeking work that could support her widowed mother and younger brother's education. The hospitality job paid decently, but it was not what she had dreamed of. Yet the lounge was adjacent to Ibrahim Okonkwo's examination room, and on slow afternoons, Maya would watch through the glass partition as master jewelers pored over stones worth more than she would earn in 100 lifetimes. She never spoke up. She never intervened. Servers were not supposed to have opinions about the merchandise. On the day Sheikh Hassan visited, Maya had already served coffee to 4 other clients. Her shift was nearly over. She had hoped to leave early and call her mother before the international rates spiked. Instead, she found herself refilling cups in the corner of the lounge, while Hassan and Ibrahim conferred intensely in the adjoining room. Through the glass, she saw the diamond resting on a black velvet tray, spotlit by a halogen lamp. It was undeniably beautiful, but as she watched Ibrahim rotate the stone beneath his loupe, Maya's attention caught on something that made her pause mid-step: the dispersion pattern. Viewed from a slight angle, the flashes of color that burst from the stone's pavilion were fractionally different from what a natural diamond of that size should exhibit. It was not a dramatic difference. It was the kind of anomaly that could easily be dismissed, as an artifact of the lighting or the stone's unusual cut. But Maya had spent over a decade training her eye. She knew what she was seeing. She just did not know if anyone would believe a waitress from Chor Bazaar over the most respected jeweler in the Emirates. And that was the moment she made a decision that would set off a chain of events none of them could have predicted. She set down her coffee tray, smoothed her abaya, and walked toward the examination room. Sheikh Hassan looked up, momentarily confused. Maya swallowed her fear. "Forgive me, Your Excellency," she said quietly. "May I please see the stone?" The room fell quiet. Ibrahim Okonkwo, a man who had examined gems for kings, looked at this waitress with a mixture of confusion and irritation. In his 40 years of practice, no server had ever interrupted an examination. No hospitality attendant had ever presumed to question his assessment. He opened his mouth to gently dismiss her, but Sheikh Hassan raised a hand. No one in that room knew it yet, but the sheikh had just made the most important decision of his entire collecting career. He looked at Maya, this young woman whose hands were still faintly calloused from years of repair work in her father's shop, and he saw something he recognized. Not arrogance, certainty. The quiet, unshakable certainty of someone who had trained their eyes for decades, even if the training had happened in a cramped Mumbai repair stall rather than a gemological institute. He gestured toward the black velvet tray. "Please," he said, "tell me what you see." Maya approached the examination table with a calm that surprised even her. Ibrahim, still visibly affronted, stepped aside but did not leave. He folded his arms, his expression one of barely concealed indignation. In the quiet of that room, with the halogen lamp casting sharp shadows across the velvet, Maya picked up the $40 million diamond with the same deliberate care her father had once used for a client's irreplaceable heirloom. She did not immediately reach for the loop. She did not ask to see the GIA certificate. Instead, she held the stone at arm's length, tilting it slowly under the light, letting its fire scatter across the walls in tiny rainbows. She waited for the precise angle. Then she brought it closer, rotated it 45 degrees, and watched the spectral colors refract through the pavilion facets. Her expression changed. It was nearly imperceptible, a slight tightening at the corners of her eyes, a fractional compression of her lips. But Hassan caught it, and so did Ibrahim. "This stone," Maya said quietly, "was grown in a laboratory, I would estimate within the last 18 months. The dispersion pattern is wrong, not by much, but there is a uniformity to the spectral scatter that nature never produces. It is too perfect." Ibrahim stiffened. The diamond sure confirmed it is natural. The Raman spectrometer confirmed the crystal structure. These are machines calibrated to detect synthetics down to parts per billion. "And you expect me to believe you can tell with your eyes what $2 million in equipment could not?" Maya set the diamond back on the tray. Her voice remained measured, respectful, but there was steel beneath it. "Your equipment, sir, measures what its engineers programmed it to measure. It looks for nitrogen. It looks for specific growth lines. But the people who grow these stones, they are not amateurs. They are chemists with PhDs. They study the detection methods and adapt. The latest generation of synthetics is doped with trace elements specifically to fool spectrometers." She paused. "But they cannot fool the physics of light, not entirely. Natural diamonds scatter their fire in a fractal distribution, slightly chaotic, slightly uneven. Lab-grown stones scatter with algorithmic uniformity. The difference is visible, but only if you know what to look for." Hassan stared at the diamond that had just become the center of an existential crisis. $40 million. A flawless decolor stone that had passed the most rigorous authentication protocols in the industry. And this woman, who earned less in a year than some of his cufflinks cost, was telling him it was worthless. "Prove it," he said quietly. "Not to me, to Ibrahim." What happened next would become legendary in the gemological community. Maya asked for a set of comparison stones, a confirmed natural diamond of similar size, a high-grade cubic zirconia, and a known synthetic. Ibrahim had all three in his vault. Within 10 minutes, the four stones sat side by side on the examination table, identical to anyone without decades of specialized training. Maya dimmed the overhead lights, leaving only the halogen spot. She then repositioned the lamp to a specific angle, 42 degrees from the table, a number she had learned from her father at age 11. "Watch the spectral scatter," she said. "Do not look at the stone's center." Look at the edges of the light pattern on the wall. One by one, she lifted each stone into the beam. The natural diamond produced a spray of color with subtle gaps, tiny dark spaces where the spectral distribution was uneven, nature's signature. The cubic zirconia threw too much fire, its dispersion so vivid it hurt to look at. The known synthetic produced a pattern that was technically perfect, but somehow flat, its colors evenly distributed in a way that felt mathematical rather than organic. And then she raised Sheikh Hassan's $40 million diamond. The pattern matched the synthetic almost exactly. The same algorithmic uniformity, the same lack of natural chaos. Under her hands, the stone that had fooled spectrometers and Raman lasers and 4 decades of Ibrahim's expertise revealed its secret. It was not a miracle of nature, it was a miracle of engineering. Ibrahim leaned forward, his professional pride warring against his scientific honesty. He asked Maya to repeat the demonstration, then repeat it again. Each time, the result was the same. Finally, he turned to his own equipment and initiated a test he had not thought to run, a photoluminescence spectroscopy that mapped excitation characteristics at cryogenic temperatures. It was not standard protocol because it required cooling the stone and took over an hour. But when the graph finally appeared on the screen, Ibrahim's face turned ashen. The results were unambiguous. The diamond exhibited silicon vacancy centers at specific wavelengths, a signature found exclusively in laboratory-grown stones. The diamond sure had missed it because the forgers had doped the stone with nitrogen at concentrations calibrated precisely to trigger a natural reading. The Raman had missed it because crystal structure alone could no longer distinguish natural from synthetic. The fraud was not crude, it was surgical. Ibrahim sank into his chair. He stared at the screen for a long time. He was not thinking about the damage to his reputation, though that would be significant. He was thinking about the precision of the deception. To create a synthetic diamond that could pass every standard test required not just chemical expertise, but intimate knowledge of the specific instruments used by the industry's most respected jewelers. "Who sold you this stone?" he finally asked. Hassan's voice was ice. "Victor Cleese, Geneva." The name hung in the air like smoke. Victor Cleese was not just any dealer. He was the chairman of the European Gemological Exchange. He sat on the advisory board of 2 major grading laboratories. He had personally authenticated stones for the British Royal Collection and the Louvre. If Victor Cleese was either complicit in or victim to this fraud, the implications staggered the imagination. Hassan stood abruptly. He was a man who had built his fortune on reading people, and everything his instincts were telling him was that Victor would not have knowingly sold a fake. That meant someone had fooled Victor Cleese, the man who was supposed to be unfoolable. And if they could fool Victor, they could fool anyone. They could have fooled everyone. He looked at Maya. "Where did you learn to see what you saw?" Maya hesitated. Until this moment, she had been operating on instinct, the compulsion to speak truth to power, inherited from a father who never let a counterfeit leave his shop. But now the weight of what she had done settled onto her shoulders. She had publicly contradicted the most respected jeweler in the Emirates. She had revealed a fraud that would trigger international investigations. And she had done it in a room full of men who had every incentive to silence her rather than thank her. "My father," she said, "Rajesh Kapoor. He repaired watches and jewelry in Chor Bazaar for 45 years. He trained me to see what machines cannot measure." Hassan nodded slowly. He reached into his jacket and produced a business card, heavy cream stock with gold foil embossing. He set it on the examination table beside the now incriminated diamond. "There will be consequences for what happened in this room today. Some of those consequences will not be pleasant for the people responsible. I need someone I can trust to examine every stone in my collection, $700 million worth, and tell me if any others are counterfeit. Your father trained you well. I am asking you to use that training for me." Maya looked at the card, then at the diamond, then at Ibrahim, who was still staring at his spectrometer screen as if it had personally betrayed him. The old jeweler spoke without looking up. "Take the card, child. Whatever I have lost here today, I lost because I stopped trusting my eyes and started trusting only my machines. Your father understood something I forgot." He turned to face her, and his eyes were wet. The truth does not require a degree to be true. Maya took the card. She did not know it yet, but she had just stepped into a labyrinth. The investigation that followed would span 3 continents and expose a forgery ring so sophisticated that it had infiltrated the highest levels of the global diamond trade. The trail began in Geneva, where Victor Cleese received the phone call that every high-end dealer dreads. Hassan did not accuse him. He simply stated the facts. The diamond was synthetic, the tests had been repeated, the results were conclusive, and Ibrahim, a man Victor respected, had nearly been deceived. Victor's response was immediate and alarming. He went silent for 11 seconds. Then he asked a question that changed the scope of the crisis entirely. "Sheikh Hassan, the stone you purchased. Can you confirm the GIA report number inscribed on the girdle?" Hassan put the phone on speaker and read the number aloud. Victor's assistant, an Austrian woman named Hilda who had worked with him for 23 years, could be heard typing in the background. When her voice came back, it was strained. "The report number matches a genuine GIA grading record," she said, "but the physical measurements on the report do not perfectly match the stone Hassan described. The recorded diameter is 0.02 millimeters different. The depth percentage is off by 0.1. The laser inscription is apparently authentic, but the stone it's inscribed on is not." This was the critical detail. The forgers had not just created a convincing synthetic. They had obtained genuine GIA report numbers, likely by photographing certificates during legitimate transactions, and then cut synthetics to match the specifications so closely that the discrepancies fell within the margin of human error. The laser inscription equipment they used was not consumer grade. It was the same equipment that legitimate grading labs employed, acquired either through theft or through the gray market that supplied the jewelry industry's shadow economy. The ring operated with terrifying efficiency. Victor's investigation, conducted over the following 72 hours with the cooperation of law enforcement agencies in 4 countries, revealed a pattern that had been hiding in plain sight. At least 11 other stones bearing forged GIA inscriptions had been sold through legitimate channels in the past 2 years. Not all were synthetics. Some were natural diamonds that had been fraudulently upgraded, treated with clarity enhancement techniques that filled microscopic fractures with a glass-like substance, a process so well executed that it fooled standard gemological examination. But the most disturbing discovery came from a forensic analysis of the stones themselves. The synthetic diamonds all shared a common chemical signature, a specific ratio of trace elements that suggested they had been grown in the same series of reactors. A laboratory in Singapore was the likely source, and that laboratory, Victor's contacts in Interpol informed him, had ties to a network of gem dealers who operated across Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. The scale of the fraud was breathtaking. Conservative estimates placed the total value of counterfeit stones circulating in the high-end market at over $600 million. The victims included hedge fund managers in New York, a Saudi princess, a Russian oligarch, and at least 3 of the world's top 10 diamond collectors. None of them had detected the fraud, not one, and the forger, the person who had orchestrated the entire scheme, remained unknown. Victor's sources described a figure who operated entirely through intermediaries. A chemist, certainly, possibly also a former employee of a major grading lab who understood the testing protocols intimately. Someone who had spent years studying the weaknesses in the authentication system before exploiting them. But here was the thing that kept Hassan awake at night. The forger had not needed to invent anything new. The tools and techniques were all documented in academic papers, in gemological journals, in the public patent filings of the companies that manufactured diamond-growing equipment. The knowledge was out there, waiting for someone with the expertise and the lack of conscience to weaponize it. The only thing protecting the global diamond trade from collapse was the assumption that no one would bother. That assumption was now shattered. Maya's role in the investigation expanded quickly. Hassan arranged for her to obtain formal gemological training, not because her eye needed improving, but because her testimony would carry more weight in the legal proceedings to come if she held recognized credentials. She completed an intensive course in Antwerp, earning her graduate gemologist diploma in half the usual time. Her instructors, initially skeptical of her unorthodox background, became her strongest advocates after she correctly identified 3 laboratory-grown stones in a blind test of 20 samples. But the deeper Maya dug into the forensic trail, the more unsettling the picture became. The forger was not just copying existing diamonds. The forger was improving on nature. Some of the synthetics Maya examined were technically superior to their natural counterparts, more brilliant, more fiery, more perfect in every measurable dimension. They were not just fakes, they were critiques. This was the philosophical crisis that the diamond industry had spent decades trying to avoid. A natural diamond derived its value from scarcity, from the billion-year journey through the Earth's mantle, from the romance of geological formation. A synthetic diamond was chemically identical, often optically superior, and cost a fraction of the price. The only thing separating a $40 million diamond from a $40,000 diamond was a story, and the forger, whoever they were, had figured out how to steal the story. Hassan convened a meeting in Zurich. The attendees included Victor Cleese, 3 representatives from GIA, a former FBI forensic accountant, and Maya, who was by now the most improbable but indispensable member of the investigatory team. The purpose was to trace the fraudulent stones back to their point of origin. The meeting lasted 9 hours. By the end, they had constructed a map of the forgery network that stretched from a reactor facility in Singapore to a cutting workshop in Surat, India, to a laser inscription service in Bangkok, to a network of couriers who moved stones across borders with falsified customs declarations. The operation was decentralized, compartmentalized, and almost impossible to dismantle by targeting any single node. But there was one vulnerability. The synthetic stones all shared a microscopic tell, a crystalline imperfection that resulted from the specific reactor conditions used to grow them. It was not detectable by standard equipment, but Maya, working with Ibrahim and a crystallographer from the University of Geneva, had developed a new screening protocol that could identify the signature in under 3 minutes. If this protocol could be deployed across the major grading laboratories, the forgery ring would lose its cover. The plan was audacious. GIA agreed to pilot the screening method at its New York headquarters. Victor Cleese volunteered to fund the equipment for 6 additional labs, and Hassan used his influence to pressure the European Gemological Exchange into mandating the new protocol for all stones above 5 carats. But there was a problem. The announcement of the new screening protocol was scheduled for a major industry conference in Hong Kong in 3 weeks. If the forger learned of it before the announcement, they would adapt their methods. They would change their reactor conditions, eliminate the crystalline signature, and disappear before the net could close. The investigation had to remain secret. Every participant signed non-disclosure agreements enforceable by severe financial penalties. But secrets in the diamond trade had a way of surfacing. 7 days before the Hong Kong conference, Maya received an envelope at her hotel in Antwerp. Inside was a single sheet of paper, no letterhead, no signature. The message was typed in a generic font. "You have a remarkable eye. It would be a shame if you lost it. Walk away." Maya stared at the words for a long time. She thought of her father, who had spent his life exposing counterfeits in a shop too small to attract anyone's notice. She thought of her mother in Mumbai, who still did not fully understand what her daughter had stumbled into. She thought of the billions of dollars at stake, the institutions whose credibility depended on stopping this fraud, the collectors who had been deceived. She folded the letter and called Hassan. The threat was not a bluff. 2 nights later, someone broke into Maya's hotel room while she was at dinner. Nothing was stolen, but the intruder left a second note on her pillow, this one more explicit. "Last warning, your expertise is inconvenient. Your absence would be convenient. Choose wisely." Maya did not choose to walk away. She chose to send copies of both notes to the forensic team, who traced the paper's stock to a distributor in Singapore, the same city where the reactors were believed to be operating. The net was tightening, but so was the danger. The question now was not just, whether they could catch the forger. It was whether Maya would survive long enough to testify when they did. And somewhere in the shadows, a chemist with a PhD and a fortune in counterfeit stones was weighing the same question from the opposite side. 3 days before the industry conference in Hong Kong, investigators finally identified the man they believed to be the architect of the entire operation. His name was Dr. Arjun Mehta, a materials scientist who had spent 12 years working in the research division of one of the world's largest diamond-growing companies. Mehta had published extensively on diamond crystallography, authored 7 patents on reactor design, and crucially, had served as a technical consultant to 2 of the major gemological laboratories during their development of synthetic detection protocols. He knew every test they deployed. He understood exactly what each instrument measured, and more importantly, what it did not measure. He had spent years designing stones that would trigger a green light on a diamond shore, that would show nitrogen at precisely the expected concentrations, that would scatter light in patterns indistinguishable from natural stones to anyone who had not trained their eye with the obsessive rigor of a Rajasthani repairman's daughter. But there was a problem. When the investigators ran Mehta's photograph past Victor Cleese's network, they discovered something deeply unsettling. Mehta had not been operating alone. He was not even the top of the pyramid. Bank records, extracted through Interpol's Financial Intelligence Unit, showed a series of payments flowing from Mehta's shell companies to a second entity, a gem trading firm registered in the British Virgin Islands with no public-facing website, no listed employees, and a board composed entirely of nominee directors. The firm was called Aurum Holdings. And the name that appeared on the incorporation documents behind 3 layers of corporate anonymity belonged to someone nobody expected. Henry Fournier was a legend in the jewelry world. He had been the chairman of the European Gemological Exchange for 8 years before Victor Cleese took over. He had curated exhibitions at the Smithsonian. He had written the definitive textbook on investment-grade colored diamonds, a volume that sat on the shelf of every serious collector in the world. And according to the Financial Trail, Henry Fournier had been laundering the proceeds of the forgery ring through a network of auction houses, private sales, and shell companies that stretched from Geneva to Dubai to the Cayman Islands. The realization hit Victor Cleese like a physical blow. Henry was his predecessor, his mentor, the man who had recommended him for the chairmanship. They had shared meals. They had appraised stones together. When Victor's daughter was married, Henry had given her a small pink diamond as a wedding gift. To discover that the same man had been systematically defrauding the industry he had sworn to uphold was not just a professional shock. It was a betrayal of almost familial proportions. But the story was worse than even Victor imagined. As the forensic team dug deeper into Fournier's financial history, they uncovered a paper trail that reshaped the entire narrative of the case. The first fraudulent diamonds had not appeared 2 years ago. They had appeared nearly a full decade earlier. Fournier had been running synthetic stones through legitimate channels for almost 10 years, starting with small stones, building his network gradually, refining the methods with each iteration. The stones that had fooled Ibrahim Okonkwo represented not the beginning of the scheme, but its mature phase, the point at which the forgeries had become so perfect that only a person with Maya's almost preternatural visual training could detect them. And here was the detail that made the investigators' blood run cold. Fournier had not merely been selling fake stones. He had been systematically injecting synthetic diamonds into the global supply chain while simultaneously serving as the chair of the very body responsible for protecting that supply chain. Every regulatory update, every detection protocol, every industry standard that passed through the European Gemological Exchange during his tenure had been subtly shaped to leave a gap, a narrow but exploitable window through which his own counterfeits could pass undetected. He had not just beaten the system, he had designed the system to be beatable. Hassan received this intelligence in his Zurich hotel suite at 2 in the morning. He read the file twice, then called Maya. She was in Antwerp, still staying at the same hotel despite the break-in and the threats, too stubborn to retreat, and too principled to compromise the investigation by disappearing. Her voice on the phone was steady, but Hassan could hear exhaustion beneath it. "They want to move on Fournier before Hong Kong," Hassan said. "The Swiss authorities are preparing an arrest warrant, but there are complications. Fournier is a Swiss citizen. His lawyers will argue jurisdiction, and he has friends in very high places, government officials, banking executives, people who have benefited from his association. If the arrest is not airtight, he will walk." Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been haunting her since she first held the sheikh's diamond up to the light. "Do we even know how many stones are still out there? How many collectors are sitting on counterfeits worth nothing?" Hassan did not answer immediately. The truth was, they had no idea. The forensic team had identified a core set of 93 fraudulent stones with confirmed links to Fournier's network, but those were only the ones they could trace. Given the decade-long timeline, the actual number could be in the thousands. If that became public before the industry had a plan to manage the fallout, the consequences would be catastrophic. The diamond market, already under pressure from lab-grown competition and shifting consumer preferences, would face a crisis of confidence from which it might never recover. "We need to control the narrative," Hassan said finally. "That means Fournier must be apprehended, the full extent of the fraud must be documented, and a remediation plan must be in place before the Hong Kong conference begins. Otherwise, the story leaks and the market panics." What Hassan did not know, what no one in the investigation knew, was that Fournier was already aware they were closing in. The same network of informants that had warned him of the new screening protocol had also alerted him to the financial investigation. And Fournier, unlike many white-collar criminals, was not paralyzed by the threat of exposure. He was energized by it. On the morning of November 17th, 48 hours before the Hong Kong conference was scheduled to begin, Fournier walked into the Geneva headquarters of the European Gemological Exchange and requested an emergency meeting with the board of directors. Victor Cleese was not present. He was already in Hong Kong, preparing for the conference. The board members who gathered in the walnut-paneled conference room expected to discuss routine agenda items. What they received instead was a performance of breathtaking audacity. Fournier stood before them, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, his silver hair combed back, and delivered a statement that would have been unthinkable from anyone else. He announced that he had discovered a widespread pattern of fraudulent diamonds circulating in the market. He claimed to have been conducting a private investigation for over a year, assisted by a team of forensic accountants. He named Arjun Mehta as the primary culprit, a rogue scientist operating out of Singapore. He acknowledged that some of the fraudulent stones had regrettably passed through channels with which he was associated, but framed this as evidence of the scheme's sophistication rather than his own complicity. Then he did something truly extraordinary. He offered to lead the industry's response. He proposed a task force, chaired by himself, to identify all counterfeit stones, compensate affected buyers, and implement the very screening protocol that Maya and Ibrahim had developed. The protocol he knew would eventually render his own stones detectable. By positioning himself as the solution, he hoped to neutralize the investigation before it could reach him. He was, in effect, setting himself up as the hero of a crisis he had created. It nearly worked. The board, stunned by his revelations, voted unanimously to authorize the task force. Fournier left the meeting with a mandate and a budget. He had precisely 36 hours before Victor Cleese learned of the board's decision and realized what Fournier was attempting. In those 36 hours, Fournier moved millions of dollars out of reach, shuttered 3 shell companies, and booked a one-way ticket to a country with no extradition treaty with Switzerland. He was not arrogant enough to assume he would succeed. He was preparing for every contingency, but he made one critical miscalculation. He assumed that Maya was a peripheral figure, a lucky amateur whose visual acuity had accidentally exposed a single stone. He did not understand that she had become the linchpin of the entire investigation. She was not just the person who spotted the fake. She was the person who could identify every other fake, the one whose courtroom testimony would connect the stones to the reactors, the reactors to Mater and Mater to Fournier. Without her, the case collapsed, and Fournier, for all his strategic brilliance, had not yet taken her seriously enough. The message Maya received on the evening of November 18th was different from the previous threats. It was not typed on generic paper. It was handwritten on Fournier's personal stationery, delivered by a courier who had been paid in cash and disappeared immediately. The note read, "Miss Kapoor, I have followed your career with genuine admiration. You possess a gift that cannot be taught. I would prefer to offer you a position rather than a warning. My organization could use someone with your abilities. The salary would be 7 figures, the work intellectually rewarding, and the legal exposure non-existent. Consider this a sincere invitation, not a threat, but understand that if you decline, I cannot protect you from those in my network who are less diplomatic than I am. You have 24 hours to decide." Maya read the note 3 times. Then she did something that would have made her father proud. She scanned the letter, uploaded it to the investigation's secure server, and sent a single-line reply to the courier's return address. "I already have a job." The next morning, November 19th, the day before the Hong Kong conference, Fournier was arrested at Zurich airport as he attempted to board a flight to Caracas. Swiss federal police, acting on an emergency warrant secured by the public prosecutor's office, intercepted him at the gate. He was handcuffed in full view of several prominent diamond traders who happened to be traveling to the same conference. The news spread through the industry like fire through dry grass. And that was when the full magnitude of the scandal became public. The arrest triggered a cascade of disclosures. GIA announced that it had identified 87 additional stones with forged inscriptions in circulation. 2 major auction houses, Christie's and Sotheby's, issued emergency statements acknowledging that they may have sold counterfeit diamonds sourced through Fournier's network. A Saudi prince filed a lawsuit. A Russian oligarch threatened extrajudicial remedies. Insurance companies began reassessing their exposure to diamond-related claims. The industry, which had weathered wars and recessions and the De Beers monopoly's dissolution, now faced an existential threat: the collapse of trust in the very concept of a certified natural diamond. But it was what happened next that transformed the crisis from a scandal into something far more significant. With Fournier in custody, investigators gained access to his encrypted records. And those records revealed something that no one, not even Victor Cleese, had anticipated. Fournier had not been operating for a decade. He had been operating for closer to 25 years. The first synthetic stones he had circulated were not sophisticated nitrogen-doped diamonds like the one that fooled Ibrahim. They were simpler creations, early-generation laboratory diamonds that were far easier to detect with modern equipment. But the buyers of those early stones had no reason to suspect fraud. They had purchased from Henry Fournier, a name synonymous with trustworthiness. Many of those stones had been resold. Some had been donated to museums. Several had been given as diplomatic gifts between heads of state. Worse still, Fournier's records showed that he had not been content merely to counterfeit diamonds. In the late 1990s, he had begun experimenting with synthetic colored diamonds, pinks, blues, and the extremely rare reds that commanded prices per carat higher than any white diamond. Colored diamonds derived their value from extreme scarcity. A single vivid blue diamond could sell for tens of millions, and Fournier had manufactured at least 14 of them, passing them off as natural through the same combination of forged certificates and exploited testing gaps. The implication was staggering. Some of the most celebrated colored diamonds in the world, stones that had appeared on magazine covers, that had been displayed at the Smithsonian, that had been worn by actresses on the red carpet at Cannes, might be laboratory creations. The investigation would take years to complete. The legal battles would stretch across decades. And at the center of it all, the woman who had started the avalanche by noticing a dispersion pattern that looked slightly too perfect was now the most critical witness in the most consequential gemological case in history. Maya stood at the window of her hotel room in Hong Kong, looking out at the harbor as the sun rose on the day of the conference. She had not slept. The threats had not stopped. The job offer from Fournier, even after his arrest, had been followed by a more explicit message from an intermediary. There were others in the network who remained free, and they did not share Fournier's gentlemanly restraint. She thought about her father, about the cramped repair shop in Chor Bazaar, about the thousands of stones he had handled with hands that never shook, no matter how valuable the piece. He had taught her that honesty was not just a moral principle, it was a form of strength. It was the thing that separated the person who could look at a stone and see the truth from the person who could look at the same stone and see only what they wanted to believe. The conference would begin in 3 hours. Hassan would announce the new screening protocol. Victor Cleese would present the findings of the investigation. And Maya, for the first time in her life, would walk onto a stage not as a server, not as a hospitality attendant, but as the person whose eyes had seen what an entire industry had missed. She was terrified, but she was ready. The next 48 hours would determine whether the global diamond trade survived or shattered. And somewhere, in the shadows of an industry built on permanence and purity, the people who had spent decades protecting Fournier's secrets were calculating their next move. They knew that if Maya testified, their entire world would collapse. They had one last chance to stop her, and they intended to take it. The first time Maya Kapoor held a diamond, she was 9 years old. Her father placed a small, cloudy stone in her palm, a piece so flawed it was nearly worthless, and asked her to describe what she saw. She told him it looked broken. He smiled and said, "All the best ones do. Perfection is what machines make. Beauty is what the earth makes, over time and under pressure." That lesson, delivered in a cramped repair shop in Mumbai, would end up reshaping a $90 billion global industry. It would send a legendary forger to prison for the rest of his natural life. It would force every major gemological laboratory on the planet to rewrite its testing protocols. And it would prove, in a way that no academic paper or industry white paper ever could, that the human eye, properly trained, deeply patient, and uncompromisingly honest, can still see truths that technology misses. Henry Fournier was convicted on 17 counts of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. He is serving a 26-year sentence in a Swiss federal prison. Dr. Arjun Mehta accepted a plea agreement in exchange for full cooperation, and his testimony led to the recovery of over 300 counterfeit stones that had been circulating in private collections. Sheikh Hassan recovered a portion of his losses through insurance, but he has publicly stated that the money was never the point. The point, he said, was that a server with no formal education had saved him from a humiliation that would have followed his family for generations. Maya Kapoor received offers from every corner of the industry. GIA offered her a senior research position. Sotheby's offered her a role heading their authentication department. Victor Cleese offered her a partnership at the European Gemological Exchange. She declined all of them. Instead, she returned to Mumbai for 6 months, to the neighborhood where her father had worked until his hands gave out and his eyes grew dim. She used the reward money Hassan insisted on giving her to establish a training center, a small institute where young people from working-class backgrounds could learn the skills her father had taught her. Not just gem identification, but the deeper discipline of looking carefully at a world designed to deceive. The center now trains over 40 students a year. Several of its graduates have gone on to work at top gemological institutions. One of them, a young woman from Dharavi, caught a synthetic pink diamond at a private sale in London last spring, a stone that had previously passed through 2 major auction houses without detection. The student called Maya immediately. Maya in turn called Hassan, and Hassan, with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had learned his lesson well, simply said, "The cycle continues." The diamond industry survived. It always does. Trust was shaken but not broken. The new screening protocols are now mandated at every major grading lab. The equipment that failed to catch Fournier's stones has been upgraded, its algorithms rewritten to search for the signatures that only human observers once noticed. In an ironic twist, some of those upgraded algorithms were trained on data supplied by Maya herself, thousands of images of dispersion patterns, captured through her eyes and translated into machine-readable code. The girl who learned to see what machines could not had now taught the machines to see what she saw. But the deeper question remains, long after the headlines fade. How many other industries are built on trust that can be exploited by someone with the right knowledge and the wrong ethics? How many certifications, authentications, and expert opinions are vulnerable to the kind of surgical forgery that Fournier perfected? The diamond trade was forewarned of its vulnerability for years. Academic papers described the exact techniques that Meta used. Industry conferences included panels on synthetic detection evasion. The knowledge was public. The will to act on it was not. It took a waitress with steady hands and a clear eye to force the reckoning. What happened in that examination room in Dubai was not a miracle. It was the result of decades of discipline, passed from father to daughter, in a shop too small to matter to anyone important. It was a reminder that expertise is not always where we look for it, that the people we ignore, the servers, the cleaners, the ones who stand in corners and refill cups, may carry within them a knowledge we desperately need and arrogantly overlook. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who would appreciate it, and subscribe to the channel. We tell stories about remarkable people who change the world from unexpected places. If you were in Maya's position, if you saw something that everyone else missed, would you speak up? Tell us in the comments. And as always, thank you for watching.